Hi, everybody. My name is Pat. I'm a tour guide here at the Museum of Natural History, and we're going to take a tour around the American mammals. We're going to visit some of the habitat dioramas in this hall. Just want to give you a little bit of background. The hall opened years ago. It opened back in 1942. And today we have 43 dioramas featuring 46 different species of animals that are native to North America. I thought we'd start with the diorama you can see down at the end of the hall. That's the bear, the Alaska brown bear. So we'll head down there and we'll talk a little bit about what a diorama is. It's called habitat dioramas because in addition to featuring an animal or animals, they're also featuring a particular location in North America. And the diorama itself has three parts. The background is the artwork. We have the animal, which has been taxidermied. And then we've got the foreground. So we see on the ground the plants and the trees and the rocks are realistic. That's what you would see if you could go to this place. So we'll start with the bear. You can see two of the Alaska brown bears here. They've just woken up from hibernation or dormancy. So in the winter, they crawl into a protected place like a cave, and their bodily functions all slow down. They just basically sleep. And so they're waking up now because it's spring, and they're really, really hungry. So in the front, you can see there's a salmon. And I'd like to ask you if you know who bit that salmon. Who do you think took that bite out of it? When you look at the jaws of the bear, I'm going to say that it's too big to have bitten that salmon. But if you look in the background, there's a Pacific otter. See him back there by the water? He caught that salmon. And when the bears showed up, he decided it would be smarter for him to just leave the salmon for them. That's a sockeye salmon. We know that it's a sockeye because of the deep red color. But in the Pacific Northwest, there are 5 different species of salmon. And you may know the salmon story. The salmon come back and swim upstream, back from the ocean, which is salt water, back into the fresh water, which is in the rivers and the streams where they were born. And this is where they spawn and lay their eggs. So they're very rich in nutrition after they've spent all that time in the ocean. There's a name for animals for fish that can live in salt water and fresh water, and it's called anadromous, and that's what salmon are. So we're in a beautiful spot in Alaska in this diorama. It's the Canoe Bay. And the artist who did this painting was there. He actually went to this spot to do his painting. And you can see some darker clouds in the background, darker gray. There was a storm there while he was doing his sketches and matching his colors. And so he included the storm in the painting. And we'll see.
Pat. Oh, I just wanted to ask a quick question that I saw come up in the chat that I thought was great for especially right now talking about the dioramas from Jamie K, who wanted to know how many different people work on a diorama, or how many people does it take to make one diorama?
There are 3 teams. So you would have the artistic team that's working on the artwork in the background. So you would have probably a main artist and then assistants working with him. Then you would have the team that's collecting all of the bits that are used in the foreground, all of the plants and the rocks. Either we bring the actual foreground materials back, or we make models of them. And then so that would be a few people. And then you've got the team that's working on the animal, that's doing the taxidermy. So that will be, again, one main taxidermist, but there will be others working with that person. So I hope
And
that
one
answers.
other quick question about the background. I actually got this question from an in-person visitor before we started this tour, because the museum is open and we do have visitors here. What kinds of paint did they use in the backgrounds?
These are going to be, I think, mostly oil paints, but there could be other types. Each artist would make the decision what types of paint that they're using. But while we're talking about the artwork, you should take a look at the background. If we can see on camera, the wall is not flat. The wall is curved. It's curved from side to side and from bottom to top, which gives the person who's visiting and viewing the diorama a sense of being in the place, actually being there with a 180-degree view. The best place to stand is right in the center, so you can get that sense that you're actually at this place. So that's the Alaska brown bear, and they'll eat anything. I mean, bears are omnivorous. They'll eat plants and fruits and chew on roots, and they'll eat animals and they'll eat fish. And the Alaska brown bear is in a place where there's a lot of salmon available to them every year when the salmon return to lay their eggs. But across the hall, I wanted us to take a look at the grizzly bear. So the grizzly bears are the same species as the Alaska brown bear that we just looked at. But the Alaska brown bear one in our diorama is 8 feet tall, and they can be as tall as 10 feet. A big grizzly bear would grow to be about 5 feet tall. And so you could think about what the difference might be. The grizzly bears live inland. There's no salmon available to the grizzly bears. So again, they will eat whatever they can find, but it's mostly going to be vegetation and plants and roots and some small animals. So the diet that's available to them is what's controlling how big they're going to be. We'll stop. Yeah, just take a quick look. This is a beautiful, beautiful drawing in the background. It's Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming, and this is the Grand Canyon. But we have another diorama that has the Grand Canyon that we're all more familiar with. And we're going to look at the North Rim and visit a cougar. So we have to walk a little bit over. We've got some visitors, which is great. It's great to see people coming to the museum. And here we go. This is the Grand Canyon. Again, I'll talk about some of the things that are in the foreground. The cougar happens to be the animal that has the most names. There are 40 different names for a cougar. I'll just mention a couple of them. You probably have heard cougar for sure, mountain lion, panther, catamount. They also have called them screamers because they have a pretty bone-chilling scream that they can use. The cougars are solitary animals. Most cats are solitary animals. The one exception being the lions in Africa, which will live in a pride. So they're solitary most of the year, but in this particular diorama, we have a male and a female. So again, we know that this is mating season. And the male is standing next to a skeleton, probably of a mule deer, which is the deer that would live in that area. And what the cougar does is he's an ambush predator. So if you know what that means, they'll hide and then they'll pounce. They'll pounce on whichever animal they're going to have for dinner, and they will drag the carcass and protect it. So they'll eat, but then they cover it and leave it. And this could go on for several days or a week. They'll go back and forth. until they've eaten enough. But look at that background. That's the Grand Canyon National Park. We're on the North Rim. There's layered rock back there, different layers. You can see different colors. And this represents the geological history of the planet, the geological history of the Earth over millions and millions of years. And when you get down to the very bottom, to the base of this canyon, the rock formation down there is 2 billion years old, with a B, 2 billion years old. So it's an incredible place to visit someday. But again, if you can't get there to visit, one of these diorama visits are going to be get you pretty close to what you'd see if you could go there.
Quick
Back when,
question, Pat, before we move on to the next diorama.
sure.
We had a question from Francis about what cougars eat.
Cougars eat meat, Francis. They are meat eaters, and I mentioned that that's a mule deer. So deer certainly would be high on their list of food that they would want. They will eat other animals. They'll hunt whatever's in the area, but they're basically meat eaters.
And one person wanted to know what is like the range of cougars? Where do they live? Do they come into New York, for example?
Not anymore. Cougars used to have a wider range in North America. They've their habitats have been disappearing, so I would have to say that pretty small. They're still out. They'll still be in mountain areas. Uh, their first choice would be to avoid human development if they can. And I know that one area, it might be Wyoming. Um, they're trying to provide protections for them because we don't want them to disappear. They're important predators in the spaces. But you're not going to see one walking into New York. If you go farther up New York State, maybe, maybe. So one of the reasons why these dioramas were done was to provide information. If you think back to 1942, travel was not easy, and for people to go places was a pretty major event. And we already knew back in 1942 that some of the habitats were endangered and that some of the animals were also in trouble. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. So these dioramas are used for conservation and education and also for appreciation of nature and what's available. Um, Maybe we'll go to the jaguar next.
Okay.
Sometimes people ask me whether the cougar is the largest cat in North America. And the answer is no, it's the jaguar. And this the jaguar is really beautiful. Um, this particular diorama is in New Mexico, and it's the largest cat in the New World, which would be North and South America. This is the female, and we have the male standing up on the rock. Take a look at the pattern in the fur. They're rosettes. They almost look like flowers, and they always have a dot in the center. They're, People often mistake them for leopards, and leopards have a completely different pattern in their fur. They are endangered, and there aren't any more jaguars in North America. If you wanted to see a jaguar, you would have to go to South America for sure, probably in the Amazon area. They've been overhunted. They're also ambush hunters themselves. And they need a very, very large territorial range. And that's hard to provide for them anymore because there's been so much development. They historically the people who lived in South America, many of the cultures there thought the jaguars were really important, and even treated them like gods. If you follow some of the story, they're really good swimmers, which is unusual for cats. Some cats don't like the water at all, and so I've told you the jaguar is the largest cat in the Americas. So somebody's going to ask me if one of the other cats is bigger. Yes. So the lion is bigger than the jaguar, not by much, by a little bit. But the biggest cat in the world is the tiger. And we don't have them here in North America naturally. So let's head over to the bison next. I told you about the dioramas and how they were formed. People go to an actual place and gather all of the information. This is a historical diorama. The bison diorama represents the mid 1800s, so the 1850s in North America. The area is the prairie. Back in 1850 and thereabouts, you can see the plains are covered with bison. The estimates were that there could have been 60 to 70 million bison living in the prairie. The prairie ran from Canada through the United States area down into Mexico, and plenty of bison. The bison were very important to the native populations that lived here. But by 1890s, left. So they've gone from 60 million to 1,000. And we can talk a little bit about that. But let's just look at the bison. Some people call them buffalo, and they're not buffalo. They're bison. Buffalo is an animal that lives in Africa. And when people saw the bison here in North America, when some of the settlers came, they thought it looked like what they were used to seeing in buffalo. So they gave it the wrong name, but they're bison. On top of this bison, we see a little bird. It's a brown-headed cowbird. And the cowbirds live with the bison herds because they get plenty of insects and ticks. And they stay with, when they lay their eggs, they don't even build a nest. They lay their eggs in some other bird's nest and let the other bird raise their young for them. The bison have horns. If you can take a look. A horn is something that the animal is born with. It's bony, and it has it for its entire life. If it gets chipped or broken, it's not going to regrow. And we have two other animals in this particular diorama. We have the pronghorn, which is over on the side. And while it may look like the males have horns, those are not horns. They're more like antlers, but the pronghorn has a particular type of antler that's different than the normal antlers. Animal in North America. It can run 50 miles an hour, and it can maintain a high speed for, at least 15 minutes. This was a very good development to allow them to escape from predators. But the interesting thing is we don't have any natural predator in North America that can run as fast as the pronghorn. This would have been a carryover from a long time ago when there would have been a very fast cat that would have been interested in hunting the pronghorn. And then underneath the pronghorn, we see another animal. Can you see him under there in the hole? Maybe move a little bit. Yeah, there he is. That's a prairie dog. And so it's not a dog, it's a rodent. And prairie dogs are very important to life in the prairie. They build burrows, and they have a whole network of almost like underground cities. They got into trouble too back in the 1800s because the ranchers thought that their herds would break their ankles in the prairie dogs' holes, which is not something that is documented or proved. So they were also eradicated for a while. And in the background. Again, the same as I described for the other dioramas. It's a curved wall. It's an actual place. In the background, we've got Mesa Verde, and this particular location is maybe only a few miles from the Oregon Trail, if you know your history about the settlement of the West.
We had a
Am
question
I
come in
coming
from,
through?
what's that?
Am I coming through clear enough?
Oh, yeah, you are.
You hear
I
me?
had a
Yeah.
quick question from, I think it was Condo, about how much do bison weigh?
Oh my goodness. So when we do weight, we usually do the males who are the biggest and the heaviest. I would say they're going to come in at close to 2,700 pounds. They're the biggest land animal in North America.
Great. Do you
Okay,
want to
so
look at the moose diorama?
yeah, we'll go do the moose. We talked a little bit about some moose that have beautiful, beautiful antlers on top of their heads. The male grows the antlers, not the female, and they can be as wide as 5 or 6 feet. And the antlers are grown. It's part of the whole mating process. The males that are healthiest and strongest are going to grow the best set of antlers, and that's going to make them attracted to the females. And what this diorama is showing us is the mating season. So we've got a female over here watching what's happening, and two males are fighting over her. And it can be a real fight. Sometimes it's just a display, and one moose will give up. But if the moose decides not to, they're going to fight, and it's a real fight. They can get hurt. They could even get killed. Um, these two are fighting. The area where they live is very marshy. It's kind of even swampy. This is the Kenai Peninsula, and the moose are the largest members of the deer family. The other thing that I think is really interesting about the moose, they are excellent swimmers. They're really, really big. They weigh about 1,500 pounds. The males will be 7 feet tall, but they can swim. And one of the reasons why they like to live, why they have to live near water, is that a full third of their diet comes from aquatic plants. And I've seen a video where the moose will dive down as much as 20 feet to get to those plants. And they have a special ability with their nostrils that they can close them off while they're diving. So when you see some animals diving underwater, you'll see air bubbles coming out of their nose or their mouth. And when moose dive, you don't see that. So back to the antlers. They have to grow their antlers every year. So they're bony, and they're pretty strong, but they lose them every year. And then next year they have to grow them again. This is it's actual antlers that were collected, and the antlers that are on display with the two animals are actual antlers. They're actual skins that have been collected, and the taxidermy work that's done at the museum is just beautiful. I've had visitors tell me that they've taken pictures of some of the animals in the diorama and convinced their friends that they actually visited these places, because it's not so obvious that they're not actually alive. Um,
One quick question, Pat. Someone wanted to know how long moose live.
I think most live, I'm going to say around 20 years. Usually they're between 20, 25 years, somewhere around there. You should probably check it, but that's what I think the answer is. The antlers, how much do you think the antlers weigh? So I told you they're bony. They grow every year. It takes a while for them to grow, and then they fall off. But one good set of antlers is going to weigh 40 pounds. That's pretty heavy. And they're holding that on their heads, and they're using it to fight in the battles for a mate. But if they have to fight to defend themselves, they could use the antlers, but more than likely they're going to use their sharp hooves. Their hoofs are very, very sharp, and they have a mean kick. So they will kick the predators and fight back. Their main predators are wolves and bears and maybe, probably not, but maybe a cat if there was a cat in the area. Right now in the United States, we have moose in Alaska, and we have them in Maine. Those are the major groups. So that's our Kenai Peninsula. So we talked about the antlers, and I wanted to introduce you to another member of the deer family. That's the caribou. And they're right over there on the right. The caribou are up in an alpine tundra area. This in British Columbia, which is part of Canada. We see antlers, and we see antlers on both the males and the females. So that's different. In moose, only the males grow antlers, and it's the same process. They grow the antlers every year, and then they lose them, and then the next year they have to grow them again. So both the males and the females will be losing antlers, except in this particular species, which we call caribou in the United States, but in Europe, where they also live, they call them reindeer. So they will be losing their antlers probably by November. And everybody knows that Santa uses reindeer to pull his sleigh. So if the reindeer, the caribou, have lost their antlers by November, who would have antlers in December? What happens in this particular species is the females, if they get pregnant, will keep their antlers as extra protection for themselves and their young. So when Santa has 8 reindeers pulling his sleigh, so we need to adjust that story a little bit. Diorama, we have the muskox. And I guess as a tour guide, I'm not supposed to have a favorite, but I think I don't know if you're familiar with them, but the muskox live in the most difficult environment. They're way up north. The location of this diorama is Ellesmere Island, which happens to be the national park that's the farthest north in North America. It's part of Nunavut in Canada. And this particular area is called the Bellows because the winds are so fierce in this area that they sound really, really loud like a bellows. And these muskox, you can see they have horns. They have an extra horny bit across the tops of their skulls. It's called a boss. And I think a lot of people think they look like another animal that we just visited. A lot of people think they're related to the bison. And as it turns out, they are not. They happen to be the largest goat. And they're goats. They have 2 layers of fur to keep them warm. The outer layer, which you can see is long and stringy, but underneath they have another undercoat, which is called kiviot. And they grow the kiviot coat for the winter and then shed it in the spring. And as an aside, kiviot is spun into yarn that's very, very warm, 8 times warmer than wool. I'm a knitter, so I actually have some, and I've actually worked with it. Why would they need so much, such protection? They do not migrate. They're up in the Arctic. The temperatures there go to 50 below zero, and they survive. They survive in that environment. They actually need the cold weather. They're not going to do well when the weather gets too warm. After I explained how the dioramas are done, they go to the actual places and collect things. They knew that they wanted a diorama for Ellesmere Island and for the Muskox, but they had no money. So the artist who did this drawing, Francis Lee Jakes, he got his hands on a black and white photograph from someone who had visited this area. And they also had two muskox skins in storage that Commodore Perry brought back. If you don't know Commodore Perry, he's credited with discovering the North Pole. So they took the two skins and the photograph, and they put this diorama together. And after the diorama opened, we had a visitor come in who had just been visiting Ellesmere Island and remarked how authentic and how beautiful the diorama was. So they did a really good job. There's another interesting. I'm sorry.
I was going to say,
Question.
one question we got from Jay was, how do they make the snow in the diorama?
The snow is ground up marble, and it actually sparkles. I don't know if the camera's going to pick that up. Yeah, if we can't get the actual foreground materials, then they will be replicated, and it looks pretty authentic. And that's how
Agreed.
it. So a little bit of history. I don't know if people remember Richard Nixon, who was our president. Back in 1972, he wanted to was to get two panda to bring back to the Washington Zoo. And what ended up happening is China agreed to lend us two panda, but the trade-off was that they wanted two muskox. So two muskox were sent to China. The the native the first people's name for the muskox is Uningmak, and it translates to mean bearded ones. So the other thing that I think is interesting about muskox is there's hardly anything to eat. I mean, take a look at where they are, and they spend the whole winter there. In the spring, the snow will melt and there's vegetation, but during the winter, they rely on the high winds to blow the snow away so that they can get at small vegetation, little plants, little flowers. There's also lichen in the area, but the muskox, they'll eat it if they're desperate, but they don't like to eat the lichen. So the caribou are interested in eating that, so they can share a particular area. Their natural predator mostly are wolves, and they have an interesting defense if there's a wolf attack. The muskox will form a circle and put the young in the center, and then they will fight off the wolves. And actually, it's interesting, almost like a football team. They have a different lineup depending upon how many wolves are attacking, and you can actually see the different tact they will take to defend themselves from wolves. It's a successful defense. However, if human hunters show up, the muskox just stand there in a circle, and it's not a good thing for them. The muskox have been around for 2.5 million years. They lived through the Pleistocene era. The Pleistocene era ended, the last ice age ended about 12,000 years old, and a lot of the animals that lived up in this area did not survive that, but the muskox Muskox did. If we have time, we should take a look at the San Jacinto Mountain, the ancient diorama.
Okay. Yeah, let's head over there.
I'm happy to see visitors to the museum. Here we go. This is a small diorama. It represents the San Jacinto Mountains in California, 11,700 years ago, almost 12,000 years ago. And this would be the end of the Ice Age. And there's some interesting things because we're talking about California. So what we see over here on the right is a woolly mammoth. So there were mastodons and woolly mammoths. You can tell the mammoths because their tusks tend to curve. In the back, you see the little shell covered. Oh, here we go. We'll do the giant sloth. We have giant sloths that were living in California. We have glyptodonts, which is the animal in the back that's covered with a shell. Off to your left, there it is. They're a lot bigger than they appear in this diorama. They're almost as big as a Volkswagen car, if you remember the Volkswagen Beetle. And if people found their shells, they could even use them for protection, almost like a tent. And then if we keep going left, we've got two saber-toothed cats. Look at the animal that they've hunted. That's a camel. Camels were native to North America. Camels were living here 12,000 years ago. And then if we keep going a little farther to the left, you see the horse. Horses were native to North America. And there's a lion in California. And that's the American lion. And the American lion, which has gone extinct, would have been larger than the African lion. And if you know the geography and some of the history, during this ice age, a land bridge formed between North America and Asia, and people, crossed over that land bridge and populated North America. But some of the animals that were living here, like the horse and the camel, left and went the other way. So if you come, make sure you stop and take a look at this diorama. There's another one on the other side. But how are we doing for time?
I think we'll take like one or two more questions. I will say that more than questions, we've had a lot of people really enthusiastic about you as our tour guide. People are saying you're their favorite. Some people wanted to see your knitting. And yeah, just but yeah.
That's
one
fun.
person. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Let me see if there's one more question. One person wanted to know if this is near the La Brea tar pits, this little mini diorama.
The La Brea tar pits are they're near Los Angeles, which is farther south in California. So no. But we know that there are a lot of saber cats that they find in the La Brea tar pits. So they must have been going around California, wherever they wanted to go back then. If you do come to the museum, on the fourth floor, which is our fossil floor, we have fossils of all of the animals that are in this diorama. So there's a connection there too. It's another really great floor to visit.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Pat, and thank you everybody for asking your great questions. And hopefully we'll be having another tour of the museum halls soon. And in the meantime, you can visit us. We are open on Wednesdays, or starting on Wednesdays through Sundays, our normal hours, and there's more information on our website. So you can